when you are alone and start to hear nothing, make sure to make noise. Back when I was still doing part-time jobs, I had a strange experience that I haven't told anyone yet. Well, save for my roommate Cole and my girlfriend Ashley at that time. My ex now, to be exact. The chilling encounter terrified me for days, even weeks on end. It had been stuck in my head for a very long time now, and I don't plan for it to stay there. It changed a lot for me. As I mentioned, I was doing part-time jobs. Yeah, multiple ones. Most of these were centered around either technical stuff on places that were open 24/7, and it had to be the latter. That day, I had to work my shift from 9 p.m. till the next day on a convenience store near the end of town. But something came up and my manager let me out early. He said that Mike, my coworker, should take the shift for the night in my stead. I was half confused and half happy that I did not dare to ask further. "So, I'm allowed to go?" I asked. "Yes. And do you want to take a ride? I could give you a lift back at your place," I remember him saying. "Nah, well, I'm well off my own. My place isn't that far anyway, so I think I can manage." "You sure?" he asked. "'Cause some weird stuff has been happening lately, and it's late. I've heard word about I cut him off. "Rumors?" before opening the store door, chuckling, but stopped after I saw seriousness drawn on Mike's face. "I'll be careful, man, I promise," I said, reassuring him while closing the glass door, giving him a wink to lighten up the mood. "Make a sound," he said, "and call me when you get home, please." His voice muffled behind me. It was a strange farewell, but I just played with it in my mind and told him the same. I know he was worried. He was a good guy. I was a skeptic if you haven't caught on already. I know Mike was just looking out for me, but I was positive that I'd be home safe. Cautionary tales of the supernatural never took a toll on me. Of course, I had no experience in that domain. Not yet, anyways. So I just decided to continue. It was indeed late. I'd only been there for 2.5 hours, so I was pretty sure it's close to midnight. I started walking. Taxis were irregular in these streets for some reasons which I didn't bother to know or plan to. Besides, I know my way around. My place was just 5 to 7 blocks away, depending on which street I took. My hike was pretty quiet. The crickets were chirping, and even the annoying buzz of the electrical current over the line wires could be heard. Dogs barking and howling, trash tumbled, and raccoons scuttled in the back of the brush. I even heard a distant shout of what seemed to be an old man annoyed by the rambling of his neighbor's dogs. I chuckled, and for a moment, what appeared to be the funniest complaint I'd ever heard. And then it happened. It wasn't noticeable at first. It crept in without warning, quick and subtle. On the first few minutes, I just thought it was only for a few seconds. But the more I walked in that lonely road, I felt cold and colder. There was silence. Complete and awful, total silence. The crickets stopped chirping. The dogs weren't barking anymore. Not even the wind or the buzzing sounds filled the air. There was only me and my shoes clacking on the sidewalk. I felt wary and unnerved as hell. It was uncanny. It felt like someone just muted the whole place, and before I could notice it, the streetlights had completely dimmed. Darkness suddenly engulfed the surroundings that seemed to swallow every bit of light, no more than a few meters away from me. The hair on the back of my neck sprung up. I tried to walk as quickly as I could, trying to keep my composure. "You're just tired," I kept telling myself. It seemed so unreal. I opened my phone to check the time, but it was dead. Of course I fucking forgot to charge it, I whispered. I started to get myself to continue walking again. That's when I started seeing things in the corner of my eyes. I would look to see what it was. What could have been, but it moved too fast. No matter how quickly I would have shifted my head, it was gone. It had me panicking. It was the only other sound. The claws rubbing against the cement road as it tried to reposition every time I checked what it was. Despite hardly seeing it, I could muster a shape and a figure. If I was not mistaken, it looked something like a gray-skinned humanoid. Naked, but was on all fours like a dog. It looked like it had a big dent on the side of his head. What appeared to be the biggest cranial cavity I've ever had a glimpse on. He was groaning, just watching with eyes. I couldn't determine where he was looking. Whatever the hell it was, it scared the shit out of me. My heart sank, and without much hesitation, I ran. I bolted out of that place as quickly as I could. But it gave chase. I knew it did because I could hear the sound of the claws behind me. It never left. My adrenaline was invested because getting the fuck away from whatever that was and regretting not taking the ride Mike had offered. I ran a straight path and never stopped. I was too scared to take a turn to a house or fence and outmaneuvering the hell out of that thing because God knows what it'll do if it caught up to me. I could partially see it running, beside me on all fours like a madman. He always stayed in the corner of my eyes, where I could see him enough, but I couldn't. I was getting exhausted. My breathing had become irregular. I knew I'd been running a full 3 or 4 minutes or so, but the house, the street, it never changed. I was stuck in some limbo, an endless pocket dimension running in circles. I tried screaming, but no voice would come out. My legs hurt, and I knew I wouldn't last much longer, even if I tried. I had to make noise. I had to call for help. Every second I could feel that thing getting closer and closer to me. I don't want to find out what happens if it did. I looked at whatever noise I could create. Banging myself on a streetlight wouldn't be much of an option. It would only hurt and lead to my undoing. Doorbells were out as well. Taking a sharp right turn would mean taking a risk encountering the said creature. And that's when it hit me. No, like it literally hit me. And it saved my life. I crashed through the metal trash bins and threw me a few feet over, breaking bottles and the street littered with trash. A second flashed and the dogs were barking again. I could hear the crickets chirping again and the buzzing of the electricity wires. I couldn't tell you how relieved I was to hear the old man who was once rambling about his neighbor's dogs now opened his window and shouted at me instead. I was sure that that thing disappeared with silence as well. I passed out after that. I woke up a little bit later that day in the hospital, having acquired injuries from the shards of bottles that met my face. Cole and Ashley were there, asking me what the hell happened. I, for one, couldn't speak. Much of that moment, but I told them the whole story anyway. At first they thought I was kidding. I must have been terrified of a mange dog or something. But when I reacted indifferent, they began to turn silent. And I kept telling them not to. I kept telling them to play music or make a sound. After that, I decided to disclose the information to only the two of them, afraid I might get laughed at again. I stopped going on that side of town and didn't return to my job. It left a scar on me. Silence bothered me for a long time. Eventually, I dropped out of college, took day jobs instead, and stayed at Cole's place for a short period of time. Ashley broke up with me a few weeks after that, but all is well. having to deal with the unknown, and even those that can manage to make itself known just enough to have you feel dread. It's the most terrifying experience a man could ever endure. Just be wary. Whenever you experience the same thing I did, be sure to have something around to make noise. It might not be that easy, but be reminded.